Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for tuning in to Sealaska Heritage Institute's May Virtual Artist in Residence Q&A. My name is Jay Zeller. I work at SHI, and it is my pleasure to introduce Janine Gibbons, a Haida raven of the double fin killer whale clan, Brown Bear House, who is a multidisciplinary artist and award-winning illustrator. Her works are inspired by the waters and lands of the Pacific and their myriad of colors, energies, and languages. She is a part of the creation of the Elizabeth Pratchevich mural in Petersburg. She's illustrated 3 books in our Baby Raven Reads series, one of which won the Picture Book Honor Award from the American Indian Library Association. Her books can be purchased in the Sealaska Heritage Store online. All purchases support both the artist and SHR art programming that helps the community and keep our ancient art practices alive. If you have any questions, please type them in the comments and I'll read them off to our guest. Janine, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me today. I'm very excited to talk about this subject that is near and dear to my heart. What are we talking about today? Haha, just kidding. And tattoos. Yay, this is where we're going today. So anyway, I'm going to start by talking about my own history and journey with the tattoos that I have on me, as I'm also currently planning to get a hand poke tattoo in Maui in June. So I've been really thinking about the next tattoos that I'm going to have put onto my body and the sacred meaning of symbols. And so I'm going to be getting some tattoos put here. I'm just telling my mom this right now. So if anybody is feeling something, it's my mom going, what? Basically, also with this book that is coming out, it was really important to me that Woman Taken Away by Killer Whales, which is coming out at the end of the month and has been translated into Hadkil into Haida. When I did the book, I really felt it was important to put the tattoos into the book so that people could study tattoos. And it was also very intentional to put a petroglyph into the story. A few pages in, there's a small petroglyph that has a killer whale on it, and that killer whale is actually from the Stikine River area. That's also paying homage to where I grew up and where the symbols have influenced me the most. And through the symbols that I have observed while illustrating and also while just growing up with petroglyphs around me. A petroglyph, by the way, are symbols that are notched into the rock, into stone. And petroglyph, there's a petroglyph and a pictograph. Let's see, am I messing this up? And pictograph are like the symbols that are painted on. If I'm nervous and I stumble on some words and mix things up, it's just because I'm like, I finally get to talk about what I love so much and what has influenced my life. Anyway, in Petersburg, where I grew up, I'm going to say we have quite a few petroglyphs that are local. I can talk about them because they're on the beach. It's on a public beach. Generally, I'm reticent to talk about petroglyphs because I know a lot of people will. Sometimes people go to seek out these places and to desecrate these sacred images and symbols that have been left by our ancestors. And just over just last night, I didn't sleep much because I was just thinking about, oh my gosh, how am I going to talk about this touchy subject? Because also, you know, if many of you are following along, maybe like a month ago, there were a bunch of pictographs that were desecrated in Moab area. And I also live in Durango area sometimes as well. And so those places mean a lot to me. And so I think that it's important that we start to discuss the sacredness of these sites so that people are educated on why you need to be more aware of your surroundings and know more of the history to things before you put a climbing nail through some place that just seems like a great place to go. And when in fact, those symbols were placed in those sacred places, sometimes thousands, if not tens of thousands of years ago. And so I think that it's important to start a dialogue with a national dialogue about these sacred sites and the history of our land. And so I have a lot of gratitude for Sealaska Heritage Institute for allowing me to even open this subject, because I know it can be very touchy for a lot of people, because in our region, which I'm going to speak of, a lot of those places belong to families, and there are symbols that represent lineages. There are symbols that represent energetic spots. Southeastern Alaska in particular, we have tons of different rock formations and ancient, like the geology of the land is quite phenomenal. And so just like when we wear jewelry that has different stones and things like that, we have large concentrations of mountains and undersea places that have all these great like vibrational places. And so a lot of those are marked also by petroglyphs and pictographs. And from that, those things for thousands of years belong to our people. So I feel like it's a great time to be able to start to talk about these things. Do you have any questions before I just keep going?
A question that I have for you is what first drew your attention to petroglyphs? How did you first learn about them?
Well, yes, growing up in Petersburg, we have a lot of ancient fish traps around there as well. And I am a very sensitive soul, I would say. And so sometimes some of those places for some people might not mean anything, might not do anything. But I'm one of those people where I'm because I work with stone as a jewelry designer and a copper, I've worked with copper for 20 years. I'm very sensitive to the energetics of metal and of stone. And also when I was in high school, I took geology, which was a class that was offered in high school out of Petersburg. So we got to study all the rocks and know all the names, which I've forgotten a lot. But yeah, in high school, we study that out of Petersburg. And then we also have a surveying team, of which we get to fly over to the Conch Glacier, Bay of Thunder, and study the glacier. Petersburg is situated in that it's the southernmost tidewater glacier in North America. And so, we have, and it's also like a border place between different tribal communities as well. And so for me, I always, just fascinated, number one, with the geology and the geography. Those things brought it to me. But then as kids, we just played on those areas and didn't really know. We were just playing, it was just part of growing up. It's just part of growing up. And then, but when I grew up in Petersburg, I grew up in the Muskeg. And so back in the Muskeg, which is for anybody that's not from Southeastern Alaska, it's like a bog, and there's lots of ponds and frogs. And usually I'm at an Airbnb right now with this beautiful background, but last night was like frog central. It usually is so much frogs, but it wasn't that loud with frogs growing up, but we played with frogs a lot. And so back in the Muskeg, there's not a lot of petroglyphs. But when I later in life also I moved and lived right in front of a petroglyph. And that really changed things for me, because I could kind of, there is a lot of energetics happening in those places, and it's not hard to imagine or visualize, our relatives there muddling, fish eggs and berries. I happen to live on the spot where there was a place where you could like physically put your hands right into it, and there's a place for your hands and what looked like kind of like a pineal gland, and then like a deer with like running like antler or hooves in the rock. But the one that's so these are all symbols that are on this rock. And then around the way is another one that is just it just covered in symbols. And right now, some of my girlfriends just came from Alaska and are here. They brought salmon. We were eating yummy salmon last night. And we were talking about what it was like also when we see people that haven't ever touched a petroglyph, what kind of their reaction is to well, number one, not having ever been around something like that. And then also just, they're like, whoa, that's like a different energy, you know? And it's pretty phenomenal to have been able to grow up like that. And so because that was part of my childhood and part of my reality, I wanted to make sure to include those in the books also, so that knowledge is not forgotten, and that it would get young people to ask questions of their elders in their community, to hopefully we find our sense of self by knowing the history of our land. And where I'm from, well, in Petersburg, a lot of people don't know what the history is unless you really dig deep. And fortunately for me, I like to dig deep because I've been studying geology and surveying and everything and jumping in muskeg ponds since I was a kid. I'm not afraid of much. So I just wanted to know more, and through asking questions, I just learned so much. Like, it's just, some of the journey of those things is asking questions. And fortunately, we have people that are like still alive that know certain parts. And then it's like when my son was little, when he was a baby, we had all these like flashcards, and I would like throw them out all over the whole floor. And he loved to, mix and match all the symbols. And so I'd throw them all out, and then he's like 1.5, and he's out there collecting all the like symbols and bringing them back to me. And so I'm a child like that, where like that's just the same thing. That's how my mind works. Is I like to match things up. And and so part of doing these books was also starting to match up all the symbols, matching up drums, matching up landmark names. I think it's pretty powerful when you start to, like, when I say LeConte, like that was some guy that was from down south. That I don't even think he actually ever came up to Petersburg. And now there's a whole glacier named after this guy. Like, why is he so deserving of a glacier named after him, right? Like, what did he do for us? Nothing, But actually, that whole, we have all these beautiful names that have meaning in history, and I feel like it's a disservice to everyone to not have some knowledge of the history of a place. When we have, like, at least right where I'm from, the southernmost tidewater glacier in North America, those we've had people in that area for 10,000 years plus. I mean, 10,000 is just I think more of an archaeological kind of number. When we say time immemorial, that means time immemorial. Like 10,000 years is a concept put onto us by our education system, which is lacking, is missing the whole picture, right? We just get like a little part of a page, like a word that's right here, when we have the whole book. We have the book within our land. And so it's my hope also that the names are restored to all the landmarks, so that everyone can be more educated. Somebody's less likely to, desecrate those petroglyphs all over, down in Moab and all over the place. Possibly that's my hope. I know that sometimes people search that out because they intentionally want to erase history. But I feel like it's an opportunity to open this and to rename our places and educate everyone, so that everyone feels more connected to the land that they are on. And when we feel connected, we want to protect things. When we are like outside of ourselves, thinking we're just floating along and aren't connected to anything, we don't mind, taking, because we're connected to it. But when we have connection, we want to protect things, and so we find that connection through history and true history, the whole big wide history. I mean, that is part of the history to even know that this, like LeConte, I'm just going to use the Bay of Big Thunder, that is part of history as well. That is part of the history now, you know, and so I feel like the history should be conclusive. And so for me, petroglyphs and pictographs is not just saying, well, it's just so big and huge and meaningful. And I feel, at least my experience is that wherever I go, when people know that I know something about stuff like that, they want to know everything. It does not matter what race they are or what color their skin is. They're like, you know, it's like this huge big book of like knowledge that's like exciting, that I find that a lot of people are actually craving and are embarrassed to ask. I find that a lot of people that are Native too, that have had their, you know, like many of us, heritage kept from us, that they feel embarrassed to ask and say they don't know. And so for me, I want to include things in the books that I illustrate that help people to understand the things that they don't know, so that then they are empowered to know and find out and ask questions and have like a base level kind of just ability to articulate their questions, you know, and find connection. I have to say that right now, while I'm talking, that there's like a whole bunch of geckos that keep crawling and are like doing crazy stuff outside. There's a gecko. I'm going to show you guys what I'm looking at here. Hold on, just let me see. How do I? You can kind of see it's real pretty. Yay! So,
Absolutely
anyway,
gorgeous.
what's that?
It's absolutely gorgeous.
Anyway, yeah, so for me, I put the tattoos also in the book, and would love to talk a little bit about my own tattoos now. If I answered, I feel like I'm answering, I'm going in a linear, I feel like I'm going in a good direction.
You are. You're answering my questions before I can ask them.
So this is a fun one. So my best friend is actually sitting on the other side of the screen as my applause. She's the applause. Can you give me a laugh? There's my laugh on demand. It's my best friend. And so I've got one of my girlfriends here that we've one of my longest time best friends. One of them, I've got a few of them. So I'm going to talk about the power of tattoos. So the tattoos that I have on me represent my lineage, of course. And so first I'm going to talk about, let's see, which one did I get first? When I was living in front of the petroglyphs that I was talking about, that I lived in Petersburg on the beach, I was headed to come to Sealaska Heritage Institute, actually, because I think the Bear book was coming out, the woman, what's the name of the book? The Woman Who Married the Bear. And I was getting, because I'm Brown Bear House, that getting this on, I might have already had the tattoo, or I was getting it, but I just moved into this house, and I had also just painted this giant octopus. So it's a sculpture. So if anybody's in Petersburg, they walk downtown, they're going to see this giant wood, three-dimensional octopus that I have. That one of my friend is a realtor, and she's left it. I let her use it for a while. Anyway, I had just painted it, and I photographed it out on the land, right in front of the place where I was living. And I just moved in that night. When I had moved in, it was like so phenomenal, because I was looking right at Devil's Thumb, and see, it's much nicer if I have the native names memorized, but I don't. That's why we're going to get everything renamed. Anyway, so that night, it was so magical. Like, there was lightning happening back in Canada, because when you're looking at that mountain range, it's like, it's Canada over there. And so there was like lightning, it was so amazing. And then so it was this rumbling, and then there were like all these humpback whales going by, and they were like breaching, but it was dark out. But there were just like all these kind of like magical things that had happened. And also that day, because I had just moved in and done the photograph, and one of my friends from Hawaii came by to visit, and we sang and blessed the land, and it was just so beautiful. And then the next day, I was leaving to come up to Sealaska Heritage Institute, but I look out the window and I'm like, what is that out on the beach? And like, it was this fleshy looking thing that was like directly out. And I'm like, but it was right where I had just photographed the octopus. And went out there, and it's like this giant Humboldt squid that is dead. It was dead, but it was like right in the same spot that I had photographed the octopus the day before. And yeah, I mean, how often do you see like a 14, I might be exaggerating. It's massive. I did say it was like a giant squid, but somebody that knows squids was like, that's the Humboldt squid. So it's a Humboldt squid, which is not as big as the giant squid, but is equally impressive when you've only seen squid that are like this big. So it was this massive squid, and yeah, it was so cool. So, but I had to go get on a flight, and it ended up that the science team from the high school came and they dissected the squid, and it was pretty cool. But then I was flying to Juneau, and was just like right now, my best friend is right there sitting by a window, and I was like, just like I'm telling you guys, I'm like, it was a giant squid, Humboldt squid, and it was there. I can't believe it. And all of a sudden, we just hear this, and it was like, what is that? And then right behind my head, because I'm telling her, and we've got a wall right here, and then she looks out behind the window, and there's a giant bear. Is it a black bear? Yeah, it's a black bear. There was a black bear scratching on the wall right behind my head. And then he skittered off. So bear, octopus, squids, right? So those are my connections to that. But once I had these tattoos, some people were not happy with me having tattoos, I would say. But then for me, it was just like, if anybody watched the video before that I did last Friday, sometimes things are good outside of me, and I'm just being directed to do what I do. Because my mom never wanted me to have tattoos. Like, she really did not want me to have any tattoos. So it was a shock to everyone when I decided to do it. But this tattoo is an octopus squid. And so I'm going to talk about this one also for a second, because it landed in literally an octopus squid was part of my story, my life story, and without the symbol. So I already had the real life experience and then the symbols. And part of this is I spend a lot of time in Port Townsend, Washington. I do a lot of, I have friends there that I go visit. I do a lot of healthy stuff there. And Port Townsend, a long time ago, was on par with being Seattle. It was like the train, I think, was going to go into either Port Townsend or Seattle. So Port Townsend could have been the size of Seattle, but instead they chose Seattle. So a lot of the Haidas, there was the trading port down there. There's a ton of history that we have. It's not just southeastern Alaska and then British Columbia and then, back down. There's huge, massive history of the whole entire coastal area that we did trading, and massive history of the Columbia River, Snake River, or the Columbia River, was like a projectile, like massive powerhouse. People could like jump on the currents to get out to the Pacific Ocean. And, it was huge. I think Astoria had like 40,000 some odd native people living in that region, before Lewis and Clark. I think that's how much there was a lot happening. And so Port Townsend is one of those regions or towns that has a lot of history. And John Swan, for the Canadians, I'm going to use the term Indian, which is kind of a derogatory term for a lot of people nowadays. But he was the Indian agent down there too, and they would draw all the tattoos of the Haidas coming in. So there's this beautiful book that I have that was given to me with all the tattoos that they had documented of the Haidas coming into Port Townsend. And this was one of those tattoos also, but you will see it in a lot of the books. And so this other time that I was there, also because I'm a unofficial historian. I like to get all the knowledge, and this is one of my books too. So I was like, I want to know more about John Swan and that region, since I was already going there once I found that book too. And so this other time I went there, this is going to be the how did I get in this direction? But I had this tattoo, and I was at my friend's place, and we had a friend there that was from Sri Lanka, and he's looking at my tattoo going, why do you have that tattoo? You know, and he's kind of explaining all the symbols on my arm. And also, so I had my books with me, like I do, and he starts reading the story, and we only have a few Haida words in there, which is like Nana Simget, you know, is the lead guy, and the woman taken away by killer whales. And he's reading the book, and he says, oh, he's like, well, Chimgit means lion in what is from Sri Lanka. It's the Tamil. He speaks Tamil. That's where he's from. And Tamil is Sanskrit, like the spoken word of Sanskrit. And so he was making all these correlations with just a few words of things from his culture and his story, saying, well, Chimgit means lion, Nana Simgit, Chimgit means lion in Tamil. And if you know, Nana Simgit symbols are, you know, brown bear, shark, double fin killer whale. There's, you know, all these kind of apex predators that go along with that clan crest. And so then to have Chimgit mean lion in Tamil, and if you are researching, you'll see that actually in Sri Lanka, it's the mask making culture as well. And so that really opened me up to ocean travel, like the conversation that this tattoo had for him and his recognition of some kind of ancient connection, which might be long gone, but also there's the similarities that bring you to start researching, for me, ocean travel, which is what it did for me. So, you know, I also started coming back and forth to Hawaii to know about like our ancient ocean connections of travel for all of, you know, Polynesia too, into New Zealand, and you know, also this familiarity I have with people that I meet from those areas. It was just always like, it's nice to see you again. You know, like even if I haven't seen them, it just is like, oh, I just found home. You know, I found home in these people, and it's beautiful. You know, it's like it's just so much more than if we're bringing it back to symbols. When I talk about how one symbol can open up these things. Not only that, but we have petroglyphs in all of these areas, and pictographs and all of these symbols, which show that our ancestors were traveling to all these places, leaving all this art that would be not only a message for them, but is and still a message for us, because if we still have questions, you know, the story is still open and the knowledge is still there. And symbols are, petroglyphs is one book, a very long book is in one petroglyph. When we include the land and the people and the, you know, if it's on a stream, you know, the life of that stream, the energetics of the land, of the rocks, of the mountains, of the weather, all of those things are contained within the symbol. So it's like when you're seeing it, you're really opening, if you're really seeing it with your fullness of who you are opening a book, which is my experience, at least. That is what happens to me when I see these things, is that it's a huge book, and there's more and more questions to go along with it. And so I'm just trying for myself to still like understand these kind of crazy, I would say like kind of crazy, it's kind of crazy, like within my own original upbringing, that this is like a whole new world of knowledge to me, but it's a whole new world that's like super ancient, right? So it's a blessing. I say it's a blessing, but also when we open up these doors, like anybody that's been to Hawaii knows how magical it is here. That's why we all come here to heal. Because everything is so alive here. That's why I'm here, because I love how, you know, Mauna Kea is just like we have ancient stories too, connecting with Hawaii and Hawaiians and Mauna Kea. And there's so much that we can learn from knowing our history and these stories. So anyway, so let's see. So then, yeah, I started traveling and doing all of these things and opening up this knowledge to the symbols and the tattoos. And there's just, these are still doorways of knowledge. I also like to think of tattoos as being kind of like microchips. That's why I was kind of meditating on that the other day, that it's like an iPhone. You know, a tattoo is like a really ancient iPhone. And so when we put it onto us, we're manifesting that knowledge. So for me, my suggestion is always make sure you know what you're putting on your body. When I put it on, I didn't understand how powerful it was, honestly, and that it would bring me to all these places. And so at that point, before I had less knowledge, but I knew within my heart that it, you know, I had a lot of symbols that pointed me in the direction to do what I do and do the things that I do. And it's kind of, you know, going into a new realm of that kind of sometimes defies logic, you know, because we're taught to be logical about everything, but you really have to be more open-minded when you decide you're going to study these things as well, because there was just a funny little cartoon that I saw that was like this mom talking to her child, and she's like, Johnny, don't look at the symbols. You don't know what's going to happen. And then, you know, he's got like his like baseball cap on, and then in the next image, like all of his body's like activated. He's like, it's too late, mom. Like I already did it. Like, so, and, you know, so there's that part of the reality of protecting things, being knowledgeable about things, having respect for the land and the symbols and the history and the knowledge, and that indigenous culture is embracing all of those places. Just like when we think about like the Hindus, like in Sri Lanka or yoga or things like that, and the energy that comes from that land and that knowledge that we do, many of us have studied now, that from our region we have that same energetics. And so our arts and our petroglyphs and all those things are also communicating that same sacredness of the land. And so we just have a different way of expressing it. But each all over the world, you know, people have a different connection with land and their body, you know, they're dancing and yoga, or, you know, our dancing and singing activates our land, because we're continuing to speak the language of the land through all of these different forms of communication. And so like it's pretty fascinating to me. I met this gal here that is from Australia, and she was talking about just how quiet it is there in some places, and just that you can like visually see like all this different weather happening from like different places, because it's so flat in certain areas. And so I learned a lot from her, also just talking about kind of the energetics of land and different land. But she's also a mariner, and so she was talking about also the different songs that have, you know, history within them, and different chanting, which represents symbols, which represents, you know, maps. That it's so beautiful and complex. There's always something more to learn. And so, you know, and then when we add astronomy into that as well, all of that is located in the symbols too, you know, like petroglyphs. You know, astronomy is like just a huge aspect of everything as well. And sometimes some of the tattoos and symbols are little keys or doorways to this kind of this knowledge. Yeah.
Well, we have a pause. I'm going to do our midway in case anybody's just tuned in. We are talking with Janine Gibbons, discussing petroglyphs and tattoo symbolism and how that all goes together. If you have any questions, please type them in the comments section and I'll read them off. Also, SHI has started construction of its art campus in downtown Juneau, which will expand opportunities for education and art. If you're interested in making a donation to the Arts Campus, please visit one of the links that I'll be posting in just a second. We're also still accepting virtual artist in residence applications for the upcoming months. If you'd like to be featured, please apply. And if you'd like to explore more of Janine's artwork, her website will also be linked in the comments section. For our next section to go into, can you maybe share how you think petroglyphs and tattoos kind of relate to each other or are similar?
As the wind starts building up here. How are they similar to each other? Well, they are. I mean, rocks are our first communicators. That's the first thing that just kind of popped into my mind. You know, before we were here, the rocks were here, and the rocks were here when we had all the ocean was above us, and then as things change, the rocks, you know, come and go, and you know, go back into the earth or come out, and they hold the history and the knowledge of the earth. And so I see that the petroglyphs and pictographs that they are the original symbols of the land because they come from the rocks. They're communicating. Whoever is creating those were people that were in tune with the history of the land. And before, you know, before we were filled with all the toxicity that we've created, all the food toxicity, trauma toxicity, you know, how we treat the animals and everything. We've got a fairly toxic planet, as we all know right now, but Mother Earth is like, you know, so phenomenal. She can just be done with us, you know, and create new if we want, you know. And so, and it's happened time and time again. We've got with our own history. We know we've been here through. What's phenomenal about southeastern Alaska is that we have oral tradition that links us back through the ice ages, through many ice ages, through glaciers coming and going, and that's all contained in those rocks, you know. And the rocks also hold the lineage too. You know, what are the first symbols of the land? And those symbols belong to people, and the human conversation and their connection with the rocks is shown, and the symbols come out of that. Because before we were writing on paper, we were writing on rocks, and we were writing on rock walls, and from those, you know, we get more language. Our languages really come, I think, from there, you know, come from the rocks. I mean, if we're going to really bring it back to the beginning, our languages come from the rocks. And so the tattoos are just more of a fine line of that communication. And when we're tapping into these ancient things, we are opening that knowledge. Knowledge keepers are the people that belong to those clans and crests. That's why when I see, I'm going to go into for a second, like when I see people that, for instance, aren't from the culture that have tattoos, like this is kind of a controversial conversation. So I'm just going to tread lightly on this for a moment. That when you tattoo something, you manifest something, right? You need to manifest, in my opinion, something that belongs to who you are as a human. So like being that I'm also Scandinavian, right? And so I'm Finnish. You know, it's gonna be pretty powerful for me personally if I'm living in Finland and I'm Finnish and I have Finnish symbolism within me. I'm gonna connect to that land. The stories are gonna open themselves up to me because that is my lineage. That is who I belong to. And for me, I personally hope that when people start to get tattoos, because I see, you know, I see that it's happening. We're all starting to understand this power of manifestation is inking it onto our bodies. That people choose to have something that's meaningful put onto their bodies, because it does open up a dialogue that allows you to be closer to your own history within on the planet of your genetics. Does that makes sense? You know, so you're opening that knowledge, and it's a powerful thing. And so I have seen people that get tattoos and kind of use it as being like a mating symbol, modern day like sexiness or something like that. But you know, when it belongs to your culture, that's not what it's about. It's about connecting to your family and friends and your lineage and the land and all of those things. And then when people ink things that don't belong to them and they put it on their body, and you see them on social media, like acting like sex symbols of something that they don't even know what they have. Obviously, there's nothing I can personally do about it, but my choice is to say something about it right at this moment, to be saying, be more thoughtful for your own self. You know, like you got to put respectful things, in my mind, put things that you want to manifest onto yourself, but that also connects you to who you are and your family and your lineage, be that from whatever part of the planet. Because you don't have to come and like take other people's stuff. Like we all have our own stuff from our own places that our genetics come from. And but for most of us, not just Native people or people from Africa or wherever, everywhere, people have history, you know, and it's a choice. Some of it hasn't been an intentional choice. Like some people have very painful histories, so they don't want to open that door of knowledge. But it is, once you get past the trauma, there's all those thousands of tens of thousands of years behind the trauma. And it's healing. It's hard to articulate for me also sometimes, like the healing that connection brings. And but putting meaningful things onto you is important. I knew a gal that got a tattoo, and it was like, I'm not gonna say like burning, you know, like it was some really negative kind of crazy tattoo, and she finally had that tattoo removed because she realized, plus it was like on her arm, so she was looking at it every day, reading this kind of negative self-fulfilling prophecy, which she did self-fulfill with drugs and all sorts of things, because she's stuck at right here where she's looking at it every day. And now she's in a place of recovery, I have to say. But she was telling me her own experience from her naivete when she was young, to put that onto her body and then be like, that took me 15 years to get through, you know. So it's important, at least in my belief system, to put things that are meaningful and have some kind of meaning to your ancestry on your body. I also knew I've known a lot of Coast Guard guys, because I'm from Coast Guard areas, and I know sometimes I knew one fellow that would get a tattoo like every place that he went, and I was seeing the tattoos going, what does that mean? You know, I was like, I don't know what that means. I was like, imagine if you knew what all your tattoos actually meant and you knew the history of those tattoos. And there was one fellow I met one time, and he had this whole intricate like honeycomb thing, you know, like tattooed on his arm. And I was trying to get him to explain to me, like, what does that mean to you? And tell me about bees, you know, like he barely knew anything, and his whole arm is covered in like a beehive, like a thing. I'm like, I mean, that's a personal choice. I mean, I can't tell you what you should and shouldn't know, but it was surprising to me, kind of, that he had gone through all this trouble to put this onto his arm and didn't really know much about bees at all. He just thought it looked cool, but he knew it was about bees, but who cares? You know, and so, you know, I think it's important, at least in my own belief system, to choose to put things onto you that are, you know, your lineage, your heritage, your something that really means something to you, just because it's going to be there until you know, unless you get it taken off. So, yeah, so that was why it was also important for me to be able to start to have this conversation, and us even talking about it brings out more knowledge that you know, I'm not an anthropologist, you know, with a PhD or archaeologist. You know, I just know from living and going, talking and learning, and that's how we all learn, you know. But symbols, you don't have to have a PhD. They're all over the place, and you can learn so much by just looking at them and spending time also. And it's like a white car. Like when you decide you're going to buy a white car, and you never even noticed that anybody had a white car before, you know, and then all of a sudden every car is a white car. It's the same thing with symbols. You don't even, you're like, I'm going to look at, you know, like the sun, for instance, like a circle with a dot, you know, and then all of a sudden everything is a circle with a dot, you know. And same thing, I'm going to jump over to another topic with that, is that my jewelry, for instance, a lot of, in the last couple of years, when I do choose to make the jewelry, I've been doing more like Mayan type jewelry shapes that I've seen on people. So more circular or square. Before I didn't really do squares. So like double squares, or before I didn't do like that donut shape, which again is like this infinite sign. But then when I started to put those on, and I would say, do you feel kind of the magnetic like energy of these different shapes? Is that the jewelry is the same thing too. The jewelry is still like a motherboard too. So like the different shapes create like different energy that, you know, is transmitted by all these parts of our body that have the knowledge. And so that's kind of the powerful part about the jewelry. Like I'm wearing this real long ones right here. This is some of my jewelry. But it's a rectangle with a circle. And so for me, this is molten. I work with hot and cold and shapes and all sorts of like different properties of the planet, I guess, when I'm creating earrings, which is just really just a continuation of this knowledge. But sometimes you might not know the knowledge, but you feel the knowledge. And I understand, because I've done this jewelry for such a long time, that people feel it, that they don't always know the language. They don't really know how to articulate it, but they can feel it. And so more so the last batches of jewelry that when I started to do more traditional ancient kind of symbols, that I in myself and other people were saying, this has a completely different energy than the ones you were before. And again, those earrings and necklaces are continuation of symbols and tattoos. You know, for us, I can talk about the Tlingit, Haida, our bracelets, Tsimshian bracelets, all Northwest Coast symbols. When we're doing it onto the cuffs, before, you know, it was outlawed, you know, to have these symbols on us, and so then they were put on as cuffs, you know, onto our bracelets, so that we could continue to remember who we are. And so I just want to give thanks to all the jewelry designers out there, continuing to put the knowledge, and that the knowledge keepers were kept in our bracelets and our symbols, and that I'm very excited to be seeing the resurgence of people tattooing symbols that are meaningful to their lineage.
Speaking of tattoos, you mentioned before that you were planning on getting a new one. Can you explain the story or the meaning behind the one that you're going to get?
Well, I'm still trying to decide, but you know, when you guys get the woman, it might be the woman taken away by killer whales, the tattoo that's on the front, the first page that you see in there. I still don't know, but if you see in the old books, because I'm a brown bear, so there's the bear tattoos that go to the front of your wrist. That was a traditional space. I really like the ancient style, just the real single lines. If you're on my Instagram, my Instagram isn't working very well the last few days because I'm in these weird places, but I can only, sometimes if I'm in Wi-Fi range, I'm like, get it. So I'm surprised that it's still working. This Wi-Fi here is kind of crazy, but I did some underwater scenes that for this artist residency, I've been doing a lot of filming. I haven't been sharing the videos. I haven't put the videos yet together because I've been filming so much. And then this last week, I had a lot of jewelry orders. People are ordering, and a lot of the jewelry also is the single symbols with stamps that I'm doing, just to continue this dialogue, so people can start to understand that as well. So I do the single lines, and so one of my clan crests is berry picker in the moon, and so that's another. I see that berry picker in the moon on my back. I've seen it like in my mind's eye for like quite a few years. So like I would like to have that at some point put on. My friends, it's going to be doing hand poke on me in June on Maui. So I'm kind of like still internalizing that. There's berry picker in the moon also that I've been thinking about. I've also been thinking about the sun symbol that I did. That I have floating around that I designed. The answer is gonna be there. But I'm very excited, and these tattoos were done by Dave Lang in Juneau for me, and so I chose Dave also because of the Tsimshian connection. But he's an illustrator, of course. We started at the same time, and so I wanted to have that connection also with our old connections, and also for me it was making this connection for having David do that. Is that there's a lake named after my grandmother on Annette Island, Helen Todd Lake, and the Tsimshian named that lake after my grandmother when she passed away in the lake when she was 41. I talked about that a little bit before. And so I wanted to continue and keep that connection with the Tsimshian. And then also, I was born in Ketchikan. We have a lot of generations of people born in Ketchikan to keep that connection. And of course, Haida, the Tsimshian, Annette Island is like between, we're the Kaiganis and the Haida Haidas, and all of our stories are connected. I guess I should probably choose actually the person that's going to be doing my hand poke is a lot of it's Tsimshian. The next person that's doing the hand poke, he's Tsimshian, Haida, and Polynesian. So I'm trying to keep that theme and that connection, because it's not only important to choose your symbols, but also who does your tattooing for you, and the history. Like for me, that's really important to me to think about. If I'm going to be putting something on my body, like that person is also I'm connected to that person and their history forever. It's on my body, and so I mean, we can even look to how powerful it is for the people that were documented that I used to put in the woman taken away by killer whales, that those tattoos are still here. When everything else is gone, those symbols are still telling stories. And if that isn't powerful enough statement, I don't know what is. So just a symbol can open up so much dialogue. And so it is, and history. And so for me, I know I'm opening up more knowledge and history to be talked about. And so I want it to be very thoughtful. So if in the next couple of weeks, people want to interject or possibly do a design or something, feel free to send me a message or tag me or whatever, that sounds like a fun thing. I plan to, I might document the whole thing too. And so we can share that with Sealaska Heritage Institute, the journey to getting the hand poke. There's so much that we could do to tell stories that just like I was saying before, like it's so powerful and fulfilling. And my life before was not this full without all the symbols. So thankfully, Sealaska Heritage Institute allowed me to put those things into the book to tell the stories, and that we get to keep talking about this stuff.
Thank you very much. I enjoy listening to you talk about it. We only have time for probably about one more question. So I am going to ask, how do you think, what is the best way to make sure that the symbolism of the tattoos, that the knowledge of the work that we're using, both that was left behind in petroglyphs and in pictographs, what do you think is the best way to continue it forward?
continue it forward.
Yes.
Well, I just see that there's this huge resurgence and pride that people are having and in the journey of traditional tattoos. And I think right now, for the first time in my life, at least, and I'm almost 44 years old, is that it is so wonderful to see all of these people getting their traditional tattoos put onto them. And it's equally as fascinating to see the journey of the tattoo artists that are doing that. And I really enjoy also kind of watching old videos and stuff of Polynesian tattoos and the facial tattoos, the whole body tattoos, the Maori, they have these ancient practices. I'm fortunately through Instagram and stuff, we can just click on and like somebody and start to learn. And so it's just that easy to start to pick up and learn through just, I mean, it's not hard. It's actually quite easy to learn now, easier to learn now than it ever has been before because of social media and artists fully telling who they are and their stories. I think it's so exciting. Like it's phenomenal. Just again, you just starting to research tattoos, you're going to open up a whole new doorway of perspective. Just by asking questions and going to your tattoo artist, talking to them. Most artists, we are kind of reclusive, some of us, and some of us are, obviously a lot of artists are quite eccentric. But we like to, if we're asked the right question, we like to talk about those things seemingly, as like I could go on forever. That you're going to just have more connection by asking questions, and then if you are getting tribal tattoos, and it's important to ask. It's important to be respectful of other people's culture. If you're going to put somebody else's symbol on your body, like, you also have to ask yourself the question, why am I choosing somebody else's symbols and not my own? And so again, those are just questions you can ask yourself. I'm not going to tell anybody to think anything, but by asking questions, you're going to just have like so much more knowledge. And I see that people are asking questions. I think this is an exciting time that people can ask questions and that answers can be provided, right? Where before questions would be asked, well, you can even ask questions, we were, killed. These things that just seem so simple right now, people were killed over things that are, tattoos, tortured. Also, I mean, I don't like to bring the dark side of things up, but the true history is also that a lot of people were killed and beat and all sorts of horrible things because of tattoos and knowing symbolism. And that is history of the planet is trying to erase the people that know what symbols mean, right? And so I feel gratitude that those, if you're looking for the question, if you're looking for the answers, that the questions can be answered. You just have to ask the right people. And I find a lot of hope in that, because when I first started on this journey and had no one to ask, it was very sad. That's part of the sadness that I went through, was the time of looking for the answers to be answered, or my questions to be answered. And then part of my happiness resurgence was going, the knowledge is not gone. Despite all the attempted efforts to get the knowledge to be taken away and to be hidden, it is still there. And so we win.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you, Janine, for answering our questions and sharing so much of the knowledge that you have. The rest of the videos in this series will be available on later on YouTube, on the Sealaska Heritage Institute channel. Thank you and have a wonderful day, everyone.